and you may be seated. I'd like to reflect with you this evening on these words in particular from the Gospel. Nothing of all the things I have said is impossible with God. So have you ever been asked, have you ever been called upon to do something impossible? Most likely, it was something very difficult, something that stretched you beyond what you thought you were capable of doing. But in all likelihood, very few of us have been asked to do something that is quite literally impossible. Now, there were times when I thought that finishing my doctoral thesis was impossible. And often that's how it felt. Notwithstanding, it was possible. With a little perseverance and long suffering, a lot of stumbling and rising again, it was, in spite of how I felt at times, perfectly possible to write a thesis. But we know that Mary, in today's gospel reading, is not being asked to write a thesis. Mary is being asked to participate in something that is humanly impossible, to be the mother of the Anointed. Well, that's something that can only come to fruition through a consonance of human willingness and a lot of divine grace. Nothing of all the things I have said is impossible with God. Mary will stretch out, figuratively and also literally. Mary will stretch out, and God will stretch out. God will stretch out in time and in space. And in that event of contact, the impossible becomes perfectly possible. The creaturely is divinized, and the divinity is humanized. Nothing of all that I have said is impossible with God. And this is simply a foreshadowing of what God wills to do in the end. The Apostle Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 13 that God will be all in all. And later in Colossians 3, that Christ is all and in all. This is God's desire, to fill all things. And this is exactly what we cannot do on our own. We cannot divinize ourselves. That is a gift. And Mary is the example of how to receive the gift in one's body and in one's soul. So when God comes and God offers you a gift like, the gift of making the impossible possible, this is how you should respond. You should respond like Mary. Now, a lot of people like to rationalize the uncomfortableness of the Annunciation story. Just rationalize it. Disenchant it. Explain it away. Natural causes. I've heard that many times. Mary and Joseph, they slipped up. Everyone knows that, right? That's how it works. We all know how babies are made. Wink, wink. That's the natural conclusion. A natural conclusion of a story without God. But with God, nothing is impossible. I'm not unsympathetic to those who prefer to rationalize the story, because we humans like to be in control. We want to be able to explain everything, to predict everything. We like the security that comes from being able to control our mental and our physical environment. The story of the Annunciation is uncomfortable. It's an unsettling story because it's about surrendering our control and trusting in God. And let's be honest, surrendering our control and trusting God, that's hard. Here in Mary's whole being, in her body and in her soul, Israel begins a new chapter in this ongoing saga of God's relentless fidelity. We hear it all through Scripture. From the opening verses of Genesis to the angels alighting upon Mary, through the apostolic age, God's relentless fidelity, God's faithfulness, God's desire to see creation fully alive. And this means inviting people to surrender their need for control, to surrender their need to rationalize possibility, and to unite themselves, to unite body and soul into a wild, wild possibility. So it surprises me that many people read the story of the Annunciation. They hear Gabriel's greeting. Nothing of all the things I have said is impossible with God. And then turn around and say, that's not possible. Sure, nothing is impossible with God. But that's not possible. In saying yes, in saying let it be so, receiving the impossible gift within her body, Mary is expanded. She's expanded beyond the limitations that nature by nature has imposed upon her. She is no longer a single, isolated individual. Mary becomes precisely that which is impossible without God, but possible with God. She becomes the Theotokos, the bearer of God within her body. Behold, the handmaid of the Lord. And Mary's yes, her yes to God, stands in stark contrast to humanity's billions upon billions of no's. The no's we utter in manifold and various ways each and every day, as individuals, as societies, as a species, billions upon billions of no's. No, I will not believe. No, I will not hope. No, I will not love. defiance in the face of God's free gift of goodness, truth, and beauty. But what we find in Mary, is that perfectly beautiful, innocent word, eloquent in its simplicity, wise beyond its years. Yes. And God works a miracle with that yes. Wow. It's a miracle of grace. Because what if Mary had said no? What if, in spite of all of the hope and all of the expectation, all of the promise passed through the prophets that a Messiah would come, what if, in spite of Israel's hope and expectation, in that moment, Mary exerted her independence and said, I don't think so. Sounds impossible. The Annunciation story is a powerful, powerful story. It's made even more so when one meditates on the possibility, the real possibility, that Mary could well have exercised her free will and said, no. I don't want any part of it. Go away. Leave me alone. I'm engaged to a nice man. He's got a job. I want a normal life. No. Instead, Mary says yes. Yes, let it be. And her yes is like a bomb set off in the midst of human history. And the shock waves of that bomb resonates and echoes in the church, in the world, in all of creation. All generations will call me blessed. And it's been this way for 2,020 years. A yes that changed the world in ways that seem unimaginable, unpredictable, and let's just say, impossible. Mary is the example of how we ought to receive the gift. Because when God comes and God offers you a gift, let's say the gift of making the impossible possible, this is how you are to respond. Nothing of all the things I have said is impossible with God.